our goal today really is to talk about where we see the future going in people analytics, and very much around this topic of being action-orientated for business performance. So I think actually following on pretty nicely from the last couple of slides from the Visio crew. So as David said, my name is Nick Matthews. I'm the VP and General Manager of Culture Amp here in EMEA. And Jess Brook is our Senior People Scientist and Head of D&I as well. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time talking about who we are, what we do, and the journey that we've been on to date. So over the last 8 years, and we started in Australia, so Melbourne, Australia is our headquarters. Over the last 8 years, we've been helping organizations to really make the world of work a lot better. And the idea is that Culture Amp makes it easy to collect, understand, and act on employee feedback. But our other mission is also to become a culture-first organization at scale ourselves. So to walk the talk, so to speak. And what we've learned along the way is that culture first is not about perks. It's not about making sure people are happy. It is about business performance. And in today's highly competitive world, putting people and culture first is the business imperative that we're seeing organizations do now. We've been working with over 2,000 culture-first organizations all around the world. And what we've done is that we've actually harnessed their learnings and built them into the platform as part of our collective intelligence features. So you've all seen the burst-in definitions of engagement 1.0 to engagement 3.0, and he's absolutely right. So gone are the days of the big top-down, once-a-year engagement survey, HR metrics for the sake of HR metrics, an engagement score, our participation rate, benchmarking, league tables. So many organizations that we see now have had big change management programs that have been running for 4, 5, 6, 10 years. And what we hear is that people have initiative fatigue. And I think where Burson is absolutely right is saying actually engagement 3.0 is moving from feedback, and it's all about action. Rather than it being top down, it's about being bottom up. It's about driving real behavior change where the work is happening. And importantly, it's about driving business outcomes. Jess, hi.
It's like back and forth. Am I on? Okay, excellent. I just want to linger on that point just for a second around the fact that we're not talking multi-year change programs when we talk about driving business change. In fact, what we're talking about is using technology to spark incremental positive change in the moments that matter, enacted by the people who are best placed to take that action. So if we think about that, then really what we should be thinking about when it comes to our people analytics is having an eye towards its action potential. That is, what is the impact or what is the action that I'm going to take now that I know all of this stuff? And really, that's something that we're so passionate about at Culture Amp, is actually using technology to convert the years of experience, the PhDs and the degrees of our data scientists and our people scientists into something that every level of the organization can interact with, can make better decisions using, so that they can actually take and make those positive incremental changes. So whether you are leading an organization, whether you're a department head, or whether you are leading a team of 6 on a factory floor, how does people analytics actually help you? What is the action potential for you in that space? So today as we talk, I want to talk about 2 things that are sort of burning topics within the people analytics space, things that Culture Amp has a deep experience and passion for. And I'm going to use these as examples, I guess, for how we can be thinking about the action potential of our people analytics. The first is organizational network analysis. And the reason I'm choosing to start here is because, as we've heard, the world of work is changing. The way that our organizations work is changing. But sometimes what I think is when we look at people analytics, we're just getting better and more sophisticated at measuring the old world of work. O&A for me is really one of those things that's starting to tap into that transformation, that change, the way in which we interact and work with each other. It's starting to really tap into that and recognize that. The problem is O&A is probably one of those ones that I would say actually we're seeing a great deal of work going into the understanding piece, but not necessarily a lot going into the what do I do with this piece. At Culture Amp, what we want to talk about is moving that aha moment from how do I understand my data to aha, I now know exactly what I need to go off and do. And I think that's when we think about O&A and how we can sort of harness the action potential of O&A, that's what we want to think about at Culture Amp. So if we think about that and we think about the action potential of O&A, it means that we're able to move beyond the org chart. How many of us here work side by side with our managers? I don't. Yet how many of our managers are the ones that are asked to provide our performance and feedback reviews? How many of us work in cross-functional teams that aren't actually even included in the org chart anymore? As an employee feedback platform, what we want to do is combine the power of O&A with feedback to look at its action potential, to say that knowing how my people are connected, how they work together, well, that's great, but actually what can I do with that? I can ask people at the right time, I can ask the right people for feedback so that I can take actions in the flow of work. I don't need to wait until the end of the quarter to my annual performance review or when the project's done. I can take action in the flow of work, which ultimately means better outcomes for the project that I'm working on. The second thing that I want to talk about is diversity and inclusion. And that's because it's not just the way in which we work that's changing. In fact, the way that our organizations are made up, that's changing too. So the work that we do at Culture Amp shows that the future is increasingly intersectional. I'm going to sort of talk a little bit more about that. If I were to ask you all to look into this mirror, it's a mirror, I promise. If I were to ask you all to look into this mirror, would you see all the characteristics that make you you? Would you understand the experiences that have shaped who you are, the type of professional that you are? No. And that's the challenge with traditional diversity metrics, traditional representation metrics. They don't tell us the whole story, and in fact, they tell us very little. So if we're thinking about diversity as the range of human differences, inclusion being everyone afforded the same opportunities, intersectionality is the compounding systems of oppression that overlap to change the experience of people at work. How are we going beyond just our traditional representation metrics to understand that? Because if we don't, we are ignoring the action potential of our diversity and inclusion analytics. So in order to do that, to tap into the action potential of our diversity and inclusion analytics, we need to consider intersectionality. We need to broaden our definition of what diversity actually means so that we capture the range of human differences, the things that actually make us us. For me, as a white 30-something-year-old woman with no children, I have a very different experience of work to a black 40-something-year-old man with 2 children. How do we make sure we're capturing that in order to improve the employee experience? And that brings me to my last point, which is around combining representation metrics, what we know about our organizations, and asking them about the experience that they have, collecting feedback from them about the experience that they have, so that we can go beyond just looking between men and women to actually looking at groups of women to understand how the experience is different. Because only by doing that does our action potential increase and we're able to create a better world of work for all of our employees. So why am I talking about this so much? Why am I banging on about action potential? The idea is that action potential is the thing that we need to think about when we think about our business outcomes. Because it's not about scores anymore. It's not, who cares what our participation rate on our engagement score was 2 surveys ago? Who cares what our engagement score was? Those things are important, but it's not the end game. How they relate and link towards our business outcomes, that's what we need to be thinking about. And in fact, that's what our most progressive and innovative companies are actually doing. So if we use Auto Trader as an example, customer of Culture Amp, one of their business outcomes was to reduce their attrition rate. They had a huge problem with attrition. Looking at the action potential of their analytics, they were able to collect employee feedback, which enabled them to understand where in the business people were likely to be leaving from and why they were leaving. Which meant that the aha moment for them was not about just understanding all of that information, but they knew what to do next. And ultimately what they were able to do was decrease their attrition by 9%, which had real business outcomes of cost savings of nearly £500,000. That's a business outcome. That's what we're talking about when we talk about action potential of our analytics and how we link that to our business outcomes. So, what all of this means is, if we're talking about driving bottom-up approach, empowering people in the right moments, to enact change in the right ways, if we're talking about this, what this means is that it kind of doesn't matter that we're the smartest people in the room anymore. In fact, the power comes from us enabling and empowering other people when it comes to people analytics. So what I want to ask you is, who's in your squad? Who is your senior sponsor that really gets people analytics and knows about the power of it and the action potential of that to drive business outcomes? Who in HR is a champion for you? Who is strategically placed across the business in order to be able to enact and take action on some of your analytics? Who is in your squad? So with that, I'd love to leave you, I guess, with a call to action. I'd love to leave you with the thought or the question around, are you enabling a bottom-up approach with your people analytics? Or are you just the smartest person in the room? Have you moved your aha moment from simply understanding the data to, aha, I now know what I need to do. I know how to take action. Nick?
And what are those business outcomes? Because they'll be different for each organization, each industry, whether it's revenue, cost savings, market penetration, return on investment. What are those things that really will have an impact when you're telling that story to your exec teams? And then lastly, who is in your squad? Some of those organizations I mentioned earlier that are really driving this kind of iterative change, really driving innovation, have fantastically diverse teams from across the business working together to solve these challenges. So again, who's in your squad? Thank you for listening. And our squad is going to be outside in the exhibition hall back at the thing.